Welcome to Christian Statesman. I'm your host, Zach Wagner, and this is episode 59, If I Were the Devil Revisited. Way back in the 1960s, Paul Harvey did a timeless piece entitled, If I Were the Devil. He outlined how evil would assert itself into our society through a variety of nefarious means. As we look around today, a time in which we call evil good and good evil, a bit of an update is in order. We need to take the devilish doings and discuss them at an even higher level, just as evil has multiplied across the world. If I were the devil today, I would probably be doing exactly what our leadership around the world is doing. The first thing I would do is take the whole idea of God out of our public discourse. I would scrub any reference from our schools, our government buildings, and any other place of public gathering. I would take God out of our media, and I would elevate scientists, celebrities, and noted philosophical thinkers to the status of our most enlightened. I would fill their heads with sweet-sounding but hollow ideas that appeal to our emotional empathies and leave little room for disputation for fear of being labeled insensitive. If I were the devil, I would look at the world filled with God's children, multiplying and replenishing the earth just as God commanded Adam and Eve. But I would look at these unprecedented numbers of God's children and I would turn the tables on them. Instead of acknowledging they are fulfilling God's commands and forwarding His plan of creation, I would make the earth itself a priority instead. I would argue that man is not here to replenish the earth, but to harm, exploit, and ultimately exhaust the earth. I would turn the idea of man's stewardship into a policy of non-interference. I would take the great scientists and politicians of the age and set them up to champion my narrative. I would create a whole field of scientific study and provide whatever data needed to promote my scheme of mankind's intrusion upon the earth. I would even set up a philosophical discipline such as Gaiaism, wherein the earth itself is held as a priority over any purpose of God or man. I would further insulate this coup with the idea that for any religion to be valid, it should be tied to my earth-first philosophies, not to any delusional idea of man's direct relationship with God. I would then attack God's plan by decrying the doctrine of overpopulation. I would take my servants and institute social schemes and promotional campaigns that encouraged population control. I would make it fashionable to have only a few children or no children at all in the name of duty to society and care for our planet. Instead of taking God's creationist position that His work was good and that the earth was full, I would keep close count of our resource consumption. Like a petulant teenager, I would point out who was using what and decry inequality and unfairness when abundance was apparent. I would sow fear into the hearts of many that we cannot sustain our lives on the planet at any reasonable pace and that we must back off any untoward consumption or disaster looms. I would put the blame on man for the vacillating cycles the earth goes through over time. I would be the accuser of men seeking to associate anything out of the ordinary in the natural world to man's interference with nature's order. I would set up political mandates such as climate change treaties to gain political control of all resources in the name of compassion for our environment. I would label anyone who disagrees with my narrative as a heretic and a denier, a person so unfeeling they do not deserve any status in the eyes of their fellow human beings. And I would use such power and control to slowly and gently tighten the ropes around the hopes and dreams of mankind to provide an independent and unfettered life of joy for themselves and their families by using guilt to discourage them amid such overriding concerns. And most insidiously, if I were the devil, I would convince those men I raised to wealth, power, and position to look around and see their fellow men as despicable trespassers. I would remind them that they are the elite, the chosen and enlightened, and convince them to hold themselves in a status above their fellow men. I would inspire them with the fear of exhausting planetary resources as a justification for getting rid of the unwashed masses of their ignorant fellow beings. I would encourage such men to employ such labels as useless eaters to describe those who are ultimately their fellow brothers and sisters, siblings in the grand creation of the Lord. With such disdain, I would slowly close off the natural love and compassion we should have for each other from their hearts. I would then plant in the minds of the powerful the worst evil of all. I would show them how to either enslave or eliminate their brethren for their own power and gain. I would teach them that it is moral for them, in the name of preserving Mother Earth, for a more enlightened posterity, to either strictly control or rid the earth of those who do not have the mind or constitution to accept their elite plan for Earth's future. I would disguise my evil intents again behind the facade of science, using fancy terms such as climatology, gender studies, or eugenics. The enlightened in my world, after all, would turn to the science I control, not God, for their answers to all of life's problems. And further, if I were the devil, I would arrange my social and political systems to force everyone to comply with my new normal. A world where God no longer matters and science can provide a solution for everything. I would have my propagandists keep the narrative going daily. Never mind that the policies or even the science itself might change from time to time, reflecting no interest or concern for the daily welfare of those laboring under such policy. I would thus force everyone to buy into my web of deceit and threaten the removal of anyone who dares to even voice dissent. And if we look carefully, if we listen with real intent, we will all come to realize that if there were a devil, and he indeed had such plans, he would be well down the road in executing such schemes. Can we recognize evil when we see it? Can we recognize that the hand of God's judgment is over us all? And when such evil arises, it may very well invoke a godly response. If you can see, it is time to choose sides. After all, we will all likely be confronted with the choice to align with one or the other eventually. Whose team are you determined to work for? Thank you for joining us today. We hope you have a wonderful day. Subscribe, tell your friends, and always have a blessed day.